Good evening, esteemed colleagues and esteemed viewers. It is my pleasure and privilege to welcome you to this very important webinar in the context of taxation of non-residents. And I am sure that not only our colleagues in India, but also the colleagues and stakeholders across many countries are viewing this webinar. So welcome each of you. Honorable past President, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, T.A. Ved Jain Saab, a tax expert and legal luminary, Chairman of the International Taxation Committee, T.A. N.C. Hegde ji, Vice Chairman of the Direct Taxes Committee as well as International Taxation Committee, T.A. Pramod Jain ji, and once again esteemed colleagues, good evening to each of you. As you are aware, today's webinar is on a very important subject matter which has come up by the amendments in Finance Act 2020. That the Finance Act 2020 has made some substantial amendments in the context of taxation of non-residents and more particularly in the context of status of the resident in India and not ordinarily resident in India. The subject per se falls within the purview of N.C. Hegde ji's committee, International Taxation Committee, but both the committees have joined because our membership are interested in knowing the repercussions all across out of such amendments. As you are aware that the Finance Bill 2020 had substantially proposed amendments to expand the scope of the term resident as well as not ordinary resident. However, down the line, because of various apprehensions and representations, the amendments were moderated and the Finance Act 2020 has thereafter passed the moderated amendments. So initially a new class of residents were being created that was with reference to stateless Indian citizens, stateless citizens, visiting Indian citizens and visiting PIOs. That when they come to visit India and if their stay is 120 days or more, then they would be treated as resident. That was the proposal in the Finance Bill. Thereafter, moderation has been provided to provide in the law that only in the case such person's income, total income in India exceeds rupees 15 lakhs, then he will come within the purview of this new class which is falling within the scope of 120 days to 182 days. 182 days and above, the provisions are remaining untouched. So it means that now in the amended provisions, if such person's income, total income in India exceeds rupees 15 lakhs, excluding his income from foreign sources, then he will be treated as resident. And foreign sources would mean that his income which arises or accrues outside India will be excluded. At the same time, even if it arises or accrues outside India, but if it is out of the business controlled in India or profession set up in India, then that income will be included. And this class has thereafter been now included in the status of not ordinarily resident also. The other proposals with reference to not ordinarily resident, which were there in the Finance Bill, have been deleted. And the elaboration of this provision will be done by Sri N.C. Hegde ji, who is chairing the International Taxation Committee. And thereafter, in respect of all other tax amendments and this tax amendment more particularly, T.A. Ved Jain Saab will take us through what are likely to be the repercussions of these amendments, who are going to be affected and who are going to be saved. And we will also have the august participation by our learned faculty and Vice Chairman C.A. Pramod Jain ji. So with this background, may I request NC Egreji to please take over the proceedings.
Thank you, Chairman of the Direct Tax Committee, Mr. Tarun Ghia, my colleague in the Council, Mr. Pramod Jain, Vice Chairman of my committee, and of course, guest speaker, Shri Ved Jain, past President, and as Tarun Bhai explained, a luminary and very well read on the principles, person on the taxation. And I think a very fit person today to be addressing very important question in relation to non-resident taxation. As Tarun Bhai explained, this particular budget, the Finance Act 2020, has a lot of provisions in relation to non-resident taxation. I think the most important one, which affects a lot of non-residents, and I'm sure a lot of our overseas members also must be participating in the conference, was the one in relation to the residential status. Now, the point in relation to residential status has moved quite a lot, and at one point of time, if a man was non-resident for 2 years, he could remain a non-resident, not ordinary resident, for about 8 years, till there was an amendment by the Finance Act 2012, when the order was reversed, and it was no longer possible for a person to stay non-resident for 2 years and then get a benefit of exemption of foreign income for a further period of 8 years. If you look at the logic of the entire amendment behind the residential status, the memorandum seems to convey that there are a lot of people who are probably stateless, as they call, and are not a tax resident of any country. So they, having been in India for less than 180 days, they are not tax residents of any other country, and therefore the feeling was that they are probably avoiding liability of paying taxes anywhere else in the world as well, and this is something that they really wanted to attack. It probably also has a corresponding a situation where under the Black Money Act, a person who's a non-resident cannot be, I think, proceeded against, and that is why probably the task force that was led by the task force in which Mr. Girish Ahuja was a member and others did recommend some amendments to the concept of residential status, and probably suggested that a provision be brought in that if a person was not a resident of any other country and not liable to tax, as the term is, then he should be deemed to be a resident in India. This led to a lot of clearly a hue and cry among our non-resident Indians who are working in overseas countries, earning very precious foreign exchange for the country, especially people in the Gulf and elsewhere. And the Finance Ministry was very quick to clarify that the intention was not to tax such people who are probably living in a country and may not be liable to tax because the country did not impose a tax, but otherwise were probably part of a country and the setup, in the sense that they were liable to tax as defined by what one would call the decision of the Supreme Court in case of Azadi Bachao. The Supreme Court had held that even if the state had the right to probably impose a tax in the future, a person would be considered as being liable to tax. So, while the passing of the Finance Act, some amendments have been made. Also, a kind of a de minimis provision has been brought in, where a person up to 15 lakhs and earning income from India up to 15 lakhs need not worry. So, some provisions have been brought in, but there is a lot of confusion because some of these provisions were brought in when the Finance Act was being passed, and generally one notices that people don't give too much of attention to the provisions which come in when the finance bill is being passed. A lot of discussion happens when the finance bill is introduced, and I think that is the time that the legislature normally uses to smuggle in other provisions, like has been done in the case of other provisions of international tax, like the equalization levy, the 194O provision, as well as provisions relating to significant economic presence. So there are many such provisions which one would not have had probably an inkling of when the finance bill was introduced, but these were probably introduced when the finance bill was being passed by the parliament, but have very important implications. The one on the equalization levy and the significant economic presence are largely aimed at capturing those transactions of the digital economy which were otherwise escaping the tax net, and is in accordance with the international the measures for base erosion and profit shifting, the BEPS project, which was launched by the OECD, and where the recommendation was that electronic commerce and digital economy transactions could be taxed, but there was no consensus amongst the OECD on what forms it should take, whether it should be in the form of a GST or it should be in the form of a TDS. India had, of course, very quickly jumped and imposed an equalization levy in relation to transactions earlier, which were limited to advertisement and things like that. Now the scope has been widened. I do not really want to take too much of time on this because we have a very learned speaker in Sri Ved Jain, and it will be injustice if I was to try and dabble and provide any comments, and we already have such a learned and erudite speaker before us. So without too much and further ado, I would hand it over to Mr. Pramod Jain in case he wants to make any other opening remarks, or ask him straight away to hand the proceedings over to Sri Ved Jain, because I think the audience is very keen to hear the man himself and not us as who are intermediaries here. Thank you.
Very rightly said, Hitesh sir. Namaste to all participants. Honorable Chairman of my Direct Tax Committee, Tarun Ghiaji, and the Chairman of the Committee for International Tax, NC Hegde sir. Our past President and a very learned person whom everyone looks towards in case of any doubt regarding taxation, income tax basically, Shri Ved Jain ji. Just to inform you, sir, just before the start of the session itself, we received more than 30 to 40 questions. And as of now also, the questions have crossed 100. So all the best. I know most of the questions would be covered during this deliberation itself. So we all are looking forward to your deliberation, sir. Sir, please.
Thank you, Pramod ji. Chairman of the Direct Tax Committee, Mr. Tarun Ghiaji. Chairman of the International Tax Committee, Mr. N.K. Hegde ji. Vice Chairman Pramod Jain ji. It has been my pleasure to be part of this program. Last week, I made a request to Pramod ji looking to the various program I was doing for non-resident Indians. So I started doing this program, I think 15-20 days back. Maybe I think the first week of April itself, when I received a call from Singapore, then Dubai, then UAE, London, Netherlands, and San Francisco, etc. So I thought that looking to this interest in this issue, let the institute should do a program. So I called up the Pramod ji, and he was kind enough immediately to connect me to the Chairman Direct Tax Committee, and they agreed to my request. So this program, friends, is at my behest and at my request, looking to the larger issue, larger topic. As we all know, we are passing through a difficult phase, and in this difficult phase, the institute is doing wonderfully well. The President and the Vice President, the entire all the council members are doing their duties, and around the clock, so many programs, so many webinars are being organized. And what I see now, this challenge is being converted into an opportunity. We all professionals probably do not get so much time to focus so much on academics and other issues. Probably this is the time which is, I will say, by default we are getting in, and that's why we are having these types of program, and then we are interacting, etc. One thing more positive about this program is that when you are speaking at a hall or a seminar, many of the members, those sitting in the hall but maybe far away, as a distance which may be running into 50 feet, 100 feet, or 200 feet. Now everybody is just before you in the camera, and you're looking straight into the eyes of everyone. What are you doing, how you are doing, and what other things are going on. So it's my pleasure to be here on this program, and I compliment the entire team and the council members for conducting this type of program. Friend, as we know, our today program is NRI taxation. I have been speaking on the budget for almost, I think, now 25 years, if I recall correctly. And every year the budget generates some interest here or there. There are some issues coming here or there, and how to handle it out. And one thing which I wonder, why we carry out amendment years after years, and still we are not satisfied what is happening, how it is happening, why it should not happen. I'm still not able to gauge why it is. What happened in the corridor, why people want to make amendment, and without, I willing, sometime considering it, what is the benefit we are going to derive out of it. I am firmly of the view that yes, taxation is an important part of the society, and it is a mean to run the society, it is not an end to the society. So taxes are to be levied from the society in a manner where the society's interest is served rather than where we believe that a tax creates a problem for this. But my experience is, years after year, there are certain provisions which do create some problems and some issues are there. And I believe this one problem, one issue, which is NRI taxation, which has come up now, is fall in that category of issue. Now, before I come to the what are the amendment and what are the issues which therein, let me just explain some basics. Excuse me, some of you may be knowing the basic, etc. We all know that income tax is a tax on income. And many people have suggested me that why don't we have a simple law where we say that this will be an income tax rate on such an income. Then immediately I react and pose a question to you that for a government it will be very easy to say you pay me 10% on your income, but immediately we people next day will raise a question, what is the income? What comes in my bank account is an income or what goes out is an income? Whether that entire credit will be an income or whether it is only after credit, after debit will be an income. You would have been hearing during when the elections are around the corner, many people come out with a suggestion, let us have a tax based on what is credited in your bank account. I pose a simple question to all those people that if the tax is so easy, then how can it happen that one will pay less tax and one will pay higher tax? The government of the day require a particular amount of tax. Now we say 12 lakh crore rupees. If we change the system from one to another system, obviously some people will be paying higher taxes and some people will be paying lower taxes. So then again there will be hue and cry. So it is a part of that exercise that acts are mandate. And in that regard, when the issue comes up that what is income, immediately the next question comes up, who are the person who are supposed to pay tax? And who are the person, whether it is those are person who live in your country, or are the person who earn income in your country, or the income which is earned outside of your country? That is also a larger question comes up. And that's why we have various provision in the Income Tax Act, and which clearly what says who is to pay the tax and how much tax has to be paid. Now, Income Tax Act is an act which define all these terminology. And immediately the first question is that who is supposed to pay the tax and who is not supposed to pay the tax. And in this regard, Section 5 clearly lays down that in case you are a resident of India, because our tax law is based on what we call residential status and situs based what we call. If a person is a resident of India, then he is required to pay tax on all income, what we call in simple terminology a global income. Income which accrues or arises in India, income which is received or deemed to have been received in India, income which accrues or arises outside India. All income, global income has to be paid tax. And in case you are not a resident, then you are supposed to pay tax on income which is received or deemed to be received in India, income which accrues or arises in India, meaning thereby you are not supposed to pay tax on income which arises outside India if you are non-resident because you are not a resident of this. So this is a simple terminology between resident and non-resident. Having said so, then the next question immediately will arise is, I have decided, yes, a resident is to pay tax on global income and non-resident is supposed to pay tax on income which is Indian income. Now the immediate next question is, who is resident and who is non-resident? And then you have to define who is resident. And in India we have defined who is my resident. An individual is said to be a resident if during the previous year he has been in India for 182 days or more. Meaning thereby out of 365 days, if you have been in India for 182 days or more, you are considered to be a resident. And if you fall in that category, then you are liable to pay tax on your global income. Second part, there is possibility that you may not be in India for 182 days or more, but still you can be considered to be resident because you have been working in a manner where you are saying every year you are less than 182 days. So there is a second clause which we say in 61C, second clause, which you say that you have been in India for a period of 365 days or more during the preceding 4 years. So that's a criteria which has been fixed because that's a issue. Yes, that if you have been in India in the last 4 years for a particular period, still you can be considered to be a resident if you have been in India for a period of 60 days or more. Now, in this case, if you are falling in this category, then you will become resident. Now, when we look into this first and second clause, immediately a question comes up that how do I become a non-resident in the first year as an Indian? Because I have been staying in India for more than 365 days in the last 4 years. Taking into consideration this fact, two explanations have been inserted to give a concession to Indian citizen. First condition is applicable in the year when you leave the country. Explanation one say, if an Indian citizen who leaves country for a vacation or for a merchant navy, etc., then this period of 60 days during the year should be read to 182 days. So meaning thereby, you will still be not a resident if you are in India, in India for a period less than 182 days, but during the period, last 4 years also, you have been there. That clause will not be applicable of 60 days. Irrespective of the number of days you have been in the preceding 4 years, you will not be considered to be a resident. Then another question comes up immediately is that in case you have been a non-resident, you have gone outside India, but you come to India regularly here, and if your stay in India is exceeding 60 days, what should be done? Because Indians are supposed to come back to India for that purpose. For that purpose, the existing law says that if you are a citizen of India means that you are holding an Indian passport, or are a person of Indian origin, meaning thereby person of Indian origin means that you have been born in India, your father has been born in India, or your grandfather or great-grandfather of undivided India, which will include Burma, which will include Bangladesh earlier, Pakistan part, which was undivided in 1935. But they have not become citizen of another country. So meaning thereby, those my father, great-father, in case they have become citizen of another country, Bangladesh, Pakistan, then this is not there. So I need not go into dwell on that. Meaning thereby, if you are a citizen of India, persons of Indian origin, and you have become a non-resident in earlier years, and in their year you want to come to India for any work, etc., this condition that you should not be in India for a period of exceeding 60 days should be read to 182 days. This was a simple provision which was available on the site on this issue. Now, considering the fact that this provision was simple and etc., this Finance Act, in order to address this issue, intends to curtail this period of 182 days to 120 days. And now I can take you to the slide, which my presentation here, just to look into, if you can just look into this. And I will just take you to what has been done and how it has been done. Green. Okay. Ankit. What can I this rolls? ठीक है, ठीक है. हाँ, स्क्रीन शेयर करनी है ना. Just a minute, I'm just sharing the screen with you. Now, this is the provision which is there. Now, this is the amendment which is proposed by this Finance Act, which has been made by the Finance Act 2020. Now, what this amendment says? This amendment says that in the case of a person who is Indian citizen and a person of Indian origin, there will be another condition that you will be considered to be a resident in case you have an income other than the foreign source income of rupees 15 lakh or more, exceeding 15 lakh rupees, and if you have in India for 120 days or more. So meaning thereby, what this amendment proposes is to create a third category. Now the amendment proposes to create a third category where now you read whatever, please read out the part in the red. And in the case of a citizen or person of Indian origin, having total income other than the income from foreign sources exceeding 15 lakh rupees during the previous year, for the word 60 days occurring therein, the word 120 days had been substituted. Now, objective of this has been explained in the memoranda. This is the memorandum which has been given in the budget. Explanatory memorandum explains the objective behind the amendment to reduce the period to 120 days as against 182 days. Instances have come to notice where period of 182 days specified in respect of an Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin visiting India during the year is being misused. Now this is important. Individuals who are actually carrying out substantial economic activities from India manage their period of stay in India so as to remain a non-resident in perpetuity and not be required to declare their global income in India. This is very, very important. Now what is being said is that, look, you people, in non-resident people, they come to India, they manage substantial economic activities from India, and that's why they do not pay tax on global income. I believe the objective then would have been to tax global income, meaning thereby income which they earn outside India. And this being the objective, I will just try to work it out whether this objective is a justified objective and whether this objective is sought to achieve, is getting achieved on that part. Take a case, if a non-resident Indian which has gone outside India and he is settled outside India, if he comes to India for a period of 120 days or more, whether we should say that he is being, this facility is being misused or being used for the purpose of India. This can be explained because this period of 182 days earlier used to be 150 days. And it was only by the Finance Act 1994, this period was increased. Can you see what was the explanation given way back in 1994 when this provision was amended so as to increase the period? Now you read para 19.2. Suggestion had been received to the fact that the aforesaid period of 150 days should be increased to 182 days. This is because the non-resident Indians who have made investment in India find it necessary to visit India frequently and stay here for the proper supervision and control of their investment. The Finance Act therefore has amended Clause B of the Income Act in order to extend the period, meaning thereby in 1994 we increased this period from 150 to 182 days as we wanted to increase the frequency because we wanted non-resident to come to India to look after their investment and etc. And now what we are saying, we don't want non-resident to come to India. If you come to India for a period of 120 days or more and your income is more than 15 lakh rupees, I will treat you as a resident. And when I will treat you as a resident, what happens? I will ask the technical team to look into. I will continue. I believe my sound is clear, I believe.
It is quite clear.
And if there is a YouTube link, please share the YouTube link so that people can watch more appropriately. But I think I will try to explain more on by verbal speaking rather than on the slide part so that you are... I hope I have been told the slide is not getting exhibited. It's not clear, I believe. Anyhow, I will just try to explain this provision verbally also because now the issue is, now what I'm trying to say, that whether there are twin objective, what is there, what will happen in case I get caught in this period of 120 days and my income is more than 15 lakh rupees. So there are two conditions. I should be in India for 120 days or more and my income should be exceeding 15 lakh rupees. If that be so, what will happen? Now, what will happen is that I will become a resident. And then there is another clause under section 6.6 which talks of that a person who gets caught in this category where his stay in India is more than 120 days, income is more than 15 lakh rupees, then we will treat him as a resident but not ordinary resident. And what is resident but not ordinary resident? For all practical purposes under the Income Tax Act, a resident but not ordinary resident is considered to be a resident. It is only for a limited purpose of section 92, 93, which are regarding transfer pricing, and which is 168. There is a condition that such person will also be considered to be a non-resident. As we all know, resident has been defined in section 6. As against this, non-resident has been defined in section 2, subsection 30. And there it says, non-resident means a person who is not a resident, but for the and does not include resident but not ordinary resident for the purpose of section 92, 93 and 168. So meaning thereby, for all other section, all purposes, a resident but not ordinary resident is considered to be a non-resident. So once I fall in this category, I am a resident but not ordinary resident, and resident but not ordinary resident under section 6.6. Now I go back to section 5, where the third category is there, is required to pay tax only on that part of income which is earned from a business controlled in or a profession set up in India. Now, I have created by this amendment a third category of person. Yes, if you are an Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin, your income is more than 15 lakh rupees during the year. In India, total income other than foreign source income, you have in India for 120 days or more, you will be considered to be resident but not ordinary resident, and you will be liable to pay tax on income which accrues and arises in India, received or deemed to be received in India, and income in respect of a business or a profession which is controlled or set up in India. Global income is still not being taxable. And now I go back to this, again, memorandum, what it says, instances have come to notice where a period of 182 days. May I just inquire it? I believe the slides are coming, visibility is okay, or there is still some issue with the visibility on this issue?
No, sir, they are coming.
So anyhow, Pramod ji, you can unmute and you can in between come to me and review on this issue.
Sure, sir, sure.
Now, look again, come back to the explanatory memorandum. Instances have come to notice where a period of 182 days in respect of Indian citizen, the person is being misused. Individuals who are actually carrying out substantial activities from India manage their period of stay in India so as to remain a non-resident in perpetuity and not to declare in global income. Now I am asking this question, even after this amendment, I am putting in restriction on my non-resident Indian citizen. Please do not come to India for 120 days or more. Do not spend money here for tourism. Do not have income in India more than 15 lakh rupees. And still whether I will be able to charge tax on a global income? All I can charge a tax on a simple income from a business control or profession set up in India. I could not come across which category of people we are targeting and for which purpose we are making the amendment. And in case this amendment, the way it has been done, if I look to the implication, you will find how this can affect by and large all non-residents who had to look into their investment in India and how this had. Now, if I look at this slide, if you find that it is only the fourth category of person which will fall into 120 days or income more than 15 lakh rupees. Now, what is this income of 15 lakh rupees? Because the next question comes to my mind is that how I will fall in this category, my income is there. Now, this income is a total income, and total income means the total taxable income under the Indian Income Tax Act. And for the purpose of including this, any income which accrues and arises in India or received or deemed to be received in India or from a profession of business control or set up in India, I am of the opinion that this third category is a very minuscule and nothing to worry about it. So this is the 15 lakh rupees income. And what will be included? If you have made as a non-resident investment in Indian shares and you are receiving any dividend, or you have purchased any Indian bonds or issued by the government or any corporate, etc., you are receiving as an interest, that is income which is chargeable to tax in India. Now, dividend has become chargeable to tax. Before 1st April 2020, it was not chargeable to tax. Now, after this, now dividend income will be chargeable to tax. Similarly, if you are having a business or profession in India, that is Indian income, you may have a capital gain arising from the sale of share or a property. And one thing which more I need to tell it, this criteria of 15 lakh rupees and 120 days is a dynamic criteria. It is not a static. It will be decided on year-to-year basis. In 1 year, it may happen that you may have been in India for 120 days or more, and another year you may be less than 120 days. Your income may be 15 lakh rupees more or not, maybe more. So it will be dynamic. So suppose you sell a property in India, you come to in India, you sell a property where you have a capital gain of 20 lakh rupees, and for selling this property, you have been in India for more than 4 months, 120 days, you will be deemed to be a resident in India under this category. Similarly, capital gain arising from the sale of share, capital share arising a company with derived value from property in India, rental income you may be having in India. So these are the income which get included. And income which will not be included for this criteria of 15 lakh rupees is the salary income which you receive outside India. Many of our friends, those who live in UAE or Singapore or maybe London, etc., whatever income you are receiving outside India, that's not to be considered. So similarly, dividend income, if you have made investment outside India, interest income, capital gain arising from property which you have outside India, rental income, or you are carrying on any business outside India, which you have no nexus with India, that will not be included. Now, whether income, this exempt income, because for the purpose of NRI, I believe two issues are very important. And interest on NRI account, on FCNR account. Now, there is a specific exemption available under the law for this purpose. Fortunately, both these interests will still continue to be exempt even if you get caught on this part. And the reasons are obvious. And the reason are this, because this income of what we call NRE income, an interest on a non-resident external deposit account, which is exempt under section 10(4), that interest is exempt on the basis of your status as a non-resident under the FEMA. If you go to section 10(4) of the Income Tax Act, there is a specific provision which says interest earned on non-resident external account by a non-resident under a non-resident is been defined under section 2W of the FEMA Act. So long you enjoy a status of a non-resident under FEMA, which I believe even if you become a resident under section Income Tax Act, you will still continue to enjoy that status under the FEMA. So that NRE account will continue, interest will be exempt. Similarly, interest on FCNR account will also continue to be exempt, which is under section 10(15), because there is specifically resident but not ordinary resident, interest has been exempt in that hand also. So these two exemptions, you need not to worry on that part. So this will continue to be available. Now, what will happen on the other episode? Now, what will be the impact? Now, suppose if you get caught in this, you are in India for 120 days or more. Okay. Friend, now coming back to, sorry for the interruption now, I will say all channel you have to bear with it. Now, what will be the implication if you get caught on this? You happen to be in India for 120 days or more and your income is say more than 15 lakh rupees. What will be? As I said, you will be treated as a resident. And if you are treated a resident, these are the consequences which are going to be on you. अंकित नीचे करना, स्क्रीन नीचे स्क्रॉल करना नीचे. Now, if you have been a resident, get caught. Next कर रहा है, नहीं है ना? Next कर. फिर बड़ा कर दो ना क्या स्क्रीन को. PowerPoint presentation का है ना, PowerPoint presentation ये होगा. बड़ा भी कर दे, बड़ा हो जाता है. I believe now, so Pramod, it's much better.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, sir.
If you now get caught in this web, what you will do, what you will lose. Under Section 10(4)(c), there are various bonds issued by the Government of India to non-resident. Interest income on that bond is exempt under Section 10(4)(c). That interest income will become chargeable to tax because your status changes from non-resident to a resident. You may be resident, but not only resident, but you will not get the benefit. Under the Section 10(6)(d), income arising from royalty or fee for technical services, which is also exempt in some category in National Technical Research Association, that will become chargeable to tax. We have a new Section 10(15)(9). As we all know, we have a gift city in the Ahmedabad, whereby we are promoting this International Financial Services Center. Interest payable by a unit located therein is exempt under Section 10(15)(9). That interest will become chargeable to tax in the hand of this person. And now, this I have already explained that these two interests will continue to be exempt because this does not affect NRE interest and FCNR interest. And now, look at this. Dividend income, which is subject to a reduced rate in the hand of a non-resident, 20% under the treaty, 20% under the Finance Act, and 5%, 10%, 15% under various law, will be subjected to the normal rate of your income. If your income is more than 10 lakh rupees, the same will get to tax 30% plus surcharge, whatever applicable, and it can go to as high as 35.88%. You have interest received from a Government of India concerns, or you have an interest received from Infrastructure Debt Fund, you have an interest received from Indian company on rupee denominated bond, which we call masala bonds. Those are chargeable to tax at 5% in the hand of a non-resident. You have subscribed it, but in that particular year where you get caught here, your rate will go up at the normal rate. Similarly, you will lose the exemption tax rate of 20% in respect of mutual fund under Section 10(23), which under many treaty it is exempt also. Royalty or fee for technical service, which get taxed at 10%, interest or dividend income that get 10%, that will get tax caught on the issue. Now, when we look at the dividend part, you will look into this aspect that dividend income, though under the Tax Finance Act is chargeable to tax 20%, but under various treaty, it is chargeable at 5%, 10%, and 15%. We have a treaty with Hong Kong where it is 5%. We have a treaty with UK where it is 10%. We have a treaty with Singapore where it is 15%. We have a treaty with Netherlands where it is 5%. So there are different treaties whereby this tax rate of dividend is lower as compared to in case you become a resident, when you will be required to pay a higher tax rate. And dividend income in the corresponding countries, UAE, Hong Kong, Singapore, is not chargeable to tax. So meaning thereby all those people who are resident of UAE, Hong Kong, Singapore, etc., they are not liable to pay tax, or they will pay nominal tax on dividend income here under the treaty, and in the home country they are not liable to pay tax. And as against this, in case they get caught on this part, then 35.88% will be the tax liability. We have a special treaty with Singapore also, where capital gain in respect of the investment made before 1st April 2017 is fully exempt. Investment made between 1st April 2017 to 31st March 2019 to be charged at 50%, and thereafter at the rate of 100%. So in case the status changes of a Singapore non-resident, then probably he will also get caught on this, and his tax rate will also increase on that part. Similar are the treaty we are having with UAE also. Capital gain arising on transfer of various property other than share animal property are only taxable in the country where the transfer alienator is a resident. Now that is the condition. What will happen therein? Now that will also become chargeable because your status changes. Now, in these circumstances, I pause for a minute here. If I am a non-resident Indian, and if this condition which I have shown you in my first slide is applicable to me, what will be the advice to me as a consultant that what should I do to get out of this. I come to my red part, and in the case of a citizen or a person of Indian origin having total income other than income from foreign sources exceeding 15 lakh rupees during the period for the word 60 days. So meaning thereby, in case I want to get out of all these implications which I have just explained to you, that I become a resident, I need to pay higher taxes, I lose my exemption. The message being given to me is, what is the takeaway? Please don't come to India for more than 4 months. If you come to me India for more than 119 days, I will change your status. I will tax you heavily. Or reduce your income. Don't earn income in India more than 15 lakh rupees. If you earn more than income of 15 lakh rupees, I will tax you. Are we achieving the purpose for which this amendment has been made? I will again come to this part. What is the objective stated? Instances have come to know, are we achieving this objective or are we defeating this objective? This is a larger question which I am posing on this issue, whether this amendment really serves the purpose, or is it putting a dampener on the people who we are looking forward to? Or do we want Indians to come more to India to promote tourism, to look after their parents, to look after their family, to have their affinity with India? Or we want to send a message, please do not come to India? Do we want non-resident Indians to put more money in India, or we want, no, don't please make investment in India? I have looked into the number. Our foreign exchange reserves are roughly $435 billion, and more than 30% of that, $130 billion, come from non-resident Indians. And those deposits are coming to India. What we want to look into that aspect. I am reminded of an earlier amendment which was proposed in the year 2004, when in the first budget of this Finance Act number 2004, an amendment was made to tax interest on NRE deposit and interest on FCNR. This amendment was passed, Finance number Act 2004 was notified, and interest from 1st September 2004 onward was supposed to be taxed. Then, looking to the hue and cry, after the act having been not notified, this date was postponed to 1st April 2005. And thereafter, when in February 2005 the finance bill was presented, this amendment was undone. And it was continued that this interest on NRE deposit and interest on FCNR account will continue to be exempt. Why it is so? Because we want more investment, we want more NRI to get affiliated with us in India. This provision, on the contrary, is going to create, I believe, a massive issue with all non-resident. I have again checked up with the data with the tax department. There are roughly 400,000, 4 lakh taxpayers which are filing the return as a non-resident, and roughly 35,000 are filing as a resident but not ordinary resident. I believe a scare will be created in those people whether they can get caught on this issue or not get caught on this issue. That's a challenge which is coming up. Now, having said so, immediate another controversy will come up. Now, look at the other issues. I am in India for, say, 125 days. My income in India is more than 15 lakh rupees. And if that be so, under the Indian Income Tax Act, I become a resident. But I am also in UAE or in Singapore or in London for 183 days or more. With this amendment, now there is a possibility, because there is 365 days in a year. A person can be under 200, 210 days to 30, 40 days in Singapore or in UAE or in London or in Netherlands or USA. If that be so, he is a resident of that country under the law. And if he is a resident of that country under the law, and in India he is, say, for 125 days and income is 15 lakh rupees, under this amended law he will again be a resident. And if that be so, what will happen and how this status will be decided? Because there is an issue now. And now, if I just look at the example of the treaty India has with UAE, it says, for the purpose of this agreement, the term resident of a contracting state means, in the case of India, any person who under the law of India is liable to tax therein on the basis of the residential status. In the case of United Arab Emirates, an individual who is present in the UAE for a period totaling into aggregate of 183 years or more. Now I become a resident of both the countries, India and UAE. If that happens, what should be the remedy now? A tiebreaker. Where by reason of the provision of paragraph 1, an individual is resident from both contracting states, then his status shall be determined as follows. And this tiebreaker rule is exactly the same what we have in cricket T20. You would recall we had a World Cup match of T20 last year in 2019, where England and New Zealand were playing in the final match. And both the teams scored the same runs, and then we had a super over which says that whosoever scores more in those 6 balls of the super over will be a winner. Still there can be a tie. Both scored the same runs. Then the next tiebreaker was that whosoever scored more fours, who has scored more boundary line, including T20 20 over and the 1 super over, is a winner. And England was the lucky one and New Zealand were the unfortunate part, they lost. Same is the rule here in the state of resident. If you are in India for 125 days, 130 days, your income is more than 15 lakh rupees, and you have been in UAE for 183 days or 200 days, now you are in catch-22 position. Which state I belong to? Whether I am a resident of India or I am a resident of UAE. You cannot be a resident of both the country. The tiebreaker rule says he shall be deemed to be a resident in a state where he has a permanent home available to him. There is a possibility a person may have a permanent home available in both the countries, or he may not have a permanent home available to in either of the country. The second tiebreaker rule, where he has what is a center of vital interest. Center of vital interest where his personal and economic relations are more, meaning thereby where his family lives, where his children are doing, where his investments are coming up, that issue is there. There is a possibility that still there may be tie. And then the third tiebreaker is where he is habitually abode. That's a tie. And even there is a possibility the person may be having a habitual abode at both the places. Then there is another clause may come in of which the country is a national, meaning thereby which citizenship comes with. Now, in this regard, these are tiebreaker rules. And I may just give an example of a case law which is Dr. Rajnikant Bhatt. In the particular case, which may just remind you that Dr. Rajnikant Bhatt, with his family, shifted to UAE in Abu Dhabi way back in 1978. And till 1987, he was in Abu Dhabi and living therein. When the children grown up, he decided to move back to India with the family for the education, etc. He was a doctor. His wife was also a doctor. They started working here, but in 89 again he decided back.
Vijayan sir is just logging in again, so it would be taking a minute or so maximum. So kindly bear with that. The topic which is taking is actually very interesting because it says whatever he's saying. If you understand that, then once it says okay, what is the impact, and then the other thing is the benefit which the nation wanted, the nation they are not getting it. So let us just wait for a minute for Vijayanji to come back in a minute.
Pramod Jainji,
Yes, sir.
you are very right. I would also tell you one thing.
Yes, sir.
That as you are aware and as the...
Friend, you just bear with me a minute. I just come back. I just trying to clear this.
Sir, you take your own time. Esteemed colleagues, the Direct Taxes Committee and the International Taxes Committee have jointly under the guidance of Honorable President ICI has taken up a project on 2 aspects. Aspect number 1, how to revive the Indian economy post
I believe now my
COVID-19.
sound will be a little more clear, I believe.
Yes, sir. Your sound is clear, but you have to stop sharing the screen once.
मैं दूसरी जगह से निकल जाता हूँ ना. I will just
Okay.
And what I was saying that how to revive the Indian economy.
is the sound clear now?
Yes, sir. It is clear, sir.
So I can continue with this or friend on this issue.
Sir, okay, just
screen
1
is
minute.
coming?
1 minute, sir. 1 minute. Sir, I am Tarun Ghia on the line.
Should I stop the screen?
No, sir. Just hold on for 1 minute because I
हाँ
was.
सर, अब
thinking-
दोबारा लॉगिन कीजिए. अब दोबारा लॉगिन
हैं?
कीजिए सर.
Now
अब
I
दोबारा
believe it's okay now. I should come with the screen now, I believe. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Just give me 1 minute, I can share screen. स्क्रीन यहाँ पे स्क्रीन शेयर कर स्क्रीन शेयर कर दीजिए इधर ऑनलाइन चल रहा है.
चेयरमैन सर, आप कुछ कह रहे थे, आप कहिए तब तक.
जस्ट गिव मी 1 minute.
Colleagues, the Direct Taxes Committee and the International Taxes Committee have undertaken a joint how to revive the Indian economy post COVID-19. One project is how to incentivize, how to
Is it now
incentivize.
clear?
Sorry. Yes, sir.
Pramodji, is it clear now?
Yes, sir, it is clear, sir.
The screen is coming now.
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
So now, friend, I was on this tiebreaker where I say that in case you are in India for 120 days or more, your income is more than 15 lakh rupees, and you are in UAE for more than 183 days, you are a resident of both. And I was on an example of Rajnikant. And in the case of a Rajnikant, the typical issue was he was in India till 1978. And from 1978, 87, he went to Abu Dhabi and stayed therein. He came back to India in 87 and stayed till 89. And thereafter, he again decided to go back, but leaving the family here. And the wife was practicing as a doctor here. And he was there. And then an issue arose that in the year 95, whether he is a resident of India or whether he is a resident of UAE. And on that issue, the first issue was whether he has a permanent home available to him in UAE or in India. There was a tie because he had a home in UAE and he had a home in India also. There was a tie on that issue. And why there was a tie? Because the issue arose, the revenue contended that this cannot be considered to be a home in Abu Dhabi because what home he has been given is a home on rent, and that's why it should not be considered. And it is available only for the purpose when he is in employment. The authority for advance ruling held no, that cannot be a criteria to decide that home should be available, whether it is rented or how long it is there, that is not the issue. It should be available for indefinite period of time. The second issue arose that since there is a tie on the permanent home available to him was the issue of personal and economic relation. There also the issue arose that his family was in India, but he has also in Abu Dhabi also. He has investment in India, he has investment in Abu Dhabi also. So on that part also, there was also a tie on that part, despite revenue raising the issue. But the third issue arose, where is the habitual abode? On that part, the authority for the advance ruling held that he was an employee with Abu Dhabi Hospital and he was habitually abiding therein. So on that issue, the issue tiebreaker was decided in favor of the UAE, and he was declared to be a non-resident of India and resident of UAE. Now, looking to this amendment which has been made, I am of the view that frankly, there will be a lot of litigation and issue arising on this aspect. Many of our friends who live in UAE or Singapore, they will be living therein for a period of 183 days or more. By and large, TT provide that a person shall be deemed to be a resident of the country under the local law. And if both the local law person is deemed to be resident, then the tiebreaker rule will apply. Now, taking into consideration this aspect, I am of the view 120 days period and 183 days period, both is going to create a problem because 365 days you can have residential status at two places. And with this result, I believe the litigations are bound to increase and a lot of issues will come up on that part. That's the issue which I am of the concern on this issue. Now, this is the DTA treaty, and that is the treaty which I have just explained to you, and these are the few judgments where this issue has been decided, how the tiebreaker rule has to be applied. Now, all these non-residents who will be filing the return, I believe that ITR 1 form will also be amended and department will be asking an information that how long you have been in India and what you have been income been. 15 lakh or more and you have been in India 120 days. Why you should not be treated as resident but not ordinary resident? And if that issue happens, then obviously this tiebreaker and the residential status or dispute will arise and all non-residents will become privy and will get entangled on that issue Similar are the provision under the UK treaty. For a time constraint, I am not going through this UK treaty, but UK treaty has a dual benefit because there you can be a tax resident, but you cannot be a tax domicile. So that issue, I am not going to look into the complexity of that issue. That gives an additional advantage to many UK residents that they can be UK tax resident, but can at the same time be non-UK domicile. And if that happens, they are also not liable to pay tax in UK on their global income, but only on the UK income. So looking to the time constraint, I am just skipping it out, but their provision is there. These are the provision, I think UK treaty, how it gets satisfied on that part. And these are the provision which are UK treaty, I'm just skipping the part. Now, these are the Singapore. Singapore also follow the same principle of 183 days. If you have been in Singapore, by and large, 183 days, you will be a resident of Singapore. And again, the tiebreaker rule apply. One of the advice cautious will be that those persons who are likely to visit in India for 120 days more or income of 15 lakh rupees, they need to be a little bit cautious that they need to ensure that they, in case they want to retain their status of a non-resident, they do create a tie which they can get decided in their favor in the country where they intend to do it. This part impact I have just explained to you. Then I would come to you, what is the takeaway? If that be the provision, now what is the takeaway will be? Now impact of this amendment is your increase in scope of total income. If you get caught in this web, that your certain income which is exempt as a non-resident, you will be liable for tax. You will lose certain income which is exemption, which you can lose that exemption. Concessional rate of tax, which I told, dividend and other interest, you will get taxed at a higher rate. Similarly, treaty benefit can get lost in many of the cases where treaty, because they're there. Increase onus to substantiate non-taxability of income, because when your jurisdiction changes and this tiebreaker rule applies, you will be required to benefit of RNOR status may not be available on moving back to India. This is one thing very important to understand, and this I can just make you understand with this slide. Now, under the section 6.6, a person is considered to be a resident but not ordinary resident if he has been a non-resident in 9 out of the 10 preceding years. Now, here also a question will arise that in case your residential status has been disturbed in any of the preceding 9 years, 1 or 2 years, when you move back to India, this benefit of 9 out of 10 years may not be available, as you can see in the slide. In assessment, if financial year 2021, you have been in India for 90 days. In 21-22, probably you are some condition, you were 150 days. Because you were Indian in 150 days and your income exceeded 15 lakh rupees, your status has changed to resident but not ordinary resident. Similarly, for 2023, you are 115 days. Here the status will not change. You will continue to be non-resident. This is incorrectly stated. You will be non-resident. For 135 days, you again will be a resident, not ordinary resident. So what will happen? You are in total stay in 7 years is 740 days. Immediately on your moving back to India, the day you land in India as a resident, your status will get converted to resident and you will not get the transitional benefit of 2 years, which is normally allowed because you have in the earlier has been a non-resident. So this is the challenge which will come up. I am showing you the slide here, how it can impact just by making an example. Look at this. You have an income of rental income of 20 lakh rupees, which is taxable in India, will continue to be earlier also and under the change law also. You have an interest income received from Indian company 40 lakh rupees, which is taxable at the special rate of 5% under section 115A. But once you get caught in this web, it will be chargeable to tax at a normal rate. Interest payable by a unit located at International Financial Center, 40 lakh rupees, which is exempt under section 1015, will get taxable. You have a dividend income from Indian company, 60 lakh rupees. Under DTA, it should be 10%. Otherwise, it is a normal rate. Interest on FCNR, 20 lakh rupees, will continue to be exempt under both circumstances. You have income accruing arising in India, say UK or Singapore as a salary, 60 lakh rupees, non-taxable and not taxable. So your income under the unamended law would have been 1 crore 20 lakh rupees with a tax liability of 13 lakh 32,500 only. But if you come to India, stay for more 120 days, despite being an employee of UAE, not doing any business, you are not having a profession, nothing doing, your tax liability income will increase from 1 crore 20 lakh to 1 crore 60 lakh rupees, and your tax liability will increase from 13 lakh to 55 lakh rupees. I am posing a question again here. What purpose this amendment is going to serve? What is the takeaway? Are we saying that I am taxing global income or I am misusing? this gentleman who is an employee in UAE, a gentleman who is an employee in Singapore or doing activity, he comes to India to look after the old parent, who will come to India for looking after the investment. He does not have any business, he does not have any profession whatsoever, absolutely. And still he will get caught. Is this a proposition which we are proposing? Is there an objective which we are trying to look into the memorandum? And what is the takeaway? The impact of the amendment will be, as a professional, our advice will be, please make sure that you don't come to India for more than 119 days. Reduce your stay. Reduce your visit to India. How will it happen? Tourism industry, other industries, or what will happen? And furthermore, or alternatively, withdraw your investment from India. If you have made investment in Indian share, make sure you withdraw it, because your income exceeds 15 lakh rupees, you will get caught in this year. I believe both objectives are not conducive for the country. Objective is that we want those people to come to India, though we want those people to make investment in India. So there is no reason why this should not happen with them. I am still concerned, and I can go back to the objective which was stated. Many of these people are misusing this provision and are overstaying itself and are not paying tax on global income. I am again posing a question, whether I am charging global income. What I am doing, I am increasing the tax on my Indian income. I am making income which is exempt taxable in India. Or a person who is a genuine non-resident is coming to India for some purposes. We are forcing him to take a decision. And moreover, the challenge will come to deductor also on TDS. He doesn't know during the year whether such person is a resident or not resident. This period of 120 days of 15 lakh income may get changed later on. I'm still worrying about. This is the first part of the amendment. And I just go to the second part, looking at the time constraint. I will just spend few minutes on this part, and then I can take away some questions on that part on this issue. Now, there is another amendment which has been made, and this is very interesting amendment which has been made. And what this says, notwithstanding anything contained in clause 1, an individual being a citizen of India having total income other than the income from foreign sources exceeding 15 lakh rupees during the previous year shall be deemed to be resident in India. Okay. In the previous year, if he is not liable to tax in any other country of his domicile or of any criteria of a similar nature. Again, what condition we have put? Two things very important. Notwithstanding anything contained in clause, an individual being a citizen of India. What is this? You need to be a citizen of India. Here, this clause is not applicable on person of Indian origin, because person of Indian origin having taken a foreign passport, they are not covered. Income exceeding 15 lakh rupees, irrespective of number of days he is in India. It is not 120 days. Even for not one day he has not been in India, still that person can be considered to be a resident of India. Just look at this again. An individual being a citizen of India having total income other than the income from foreign sources exceeding 15 lakh shall be deemed to be a resident if he is not liable to tax in any other country or territory. Again, criteria is 15 lakh rupees. If a person of Indian origin, whatever he does outside, I will not get hold of it if he does not have income of exceeding 15 lakh rupees. But if he has exceeding 15 lakh rupees, I will say, gentlemen, come here. Show me whether you have a business or profession in India, and if you have, what income you are earning from business or profession outside India of that issue. Only that category of person I am trying to get hold of without being in India for a day. Without being in India for a day, that is a person. And what I want to intend to tax is, intend to tax business income which is controlled from India or a profession which is controlled set up in India. I believe there may be few lawyers, few professionals which are in India, but they have taken a non-residential status outside India. They may be running their profession therein because they are doing India also, etc. And I want to get hold of those professions. And what message I am saying? If your income is more than 15 lakh rupees, I will get a hold of this person without being in India. And what will happen to this person? And what is the objective status is very important. This is the memorandum of the finance bill. The issue of stateless person has been bothering the tax world for quite some time. It is entirely possible for an individual to arrange his affair in such a fashion that he is not liable to tax in any country or jurisdiction during a year. This arrangement is typically employed by high net worth individuals to avoid paying taxes to any country jurisdiction on income they earn. tax law should not encourage a situation where such person is liable to tax in the country. Frankly speaking, I in principally do not agree with this proposition. The world over, all countries say income which accrues or arises in their country is liable to tax in that country, irrespective of your status. India also says whether you are a foreigner, whether you are a non-resident, whatever you are, if you earn any Indian income, I will tax you. UK law also says that if you earn any income, I will tax you. Singapore also says that if you earn any income from Singapore, I will tax you. USA also says that if you any income arises, I will tax you. Now, which income we are talking about it is not liable to tax. I believe probably they are targeting the UAE that their income is not liable to tax. I am frankly of the opinion that it cannot be said that UAE income is not liable to tax. It is that their countries say that we do not levy tax on the income. It does not mean it is not liable to tax. And on that proposition also, there are large number of judgment which has come up on that issue. The earliest judgment was given in December 1994, where it was said that no, it cannot be said that UAE residents are not liable to tax. It is income which is tax-free, but they are liable to tax. And that judgment was again, I think, distinguished by the Authority for Advanced Ruling in May 1999 in the serial case. But that in 2003, Supreme Court judgment came in the case of Union of India versus Azadi Bachao Andolan, and where this judgment of Authority for Advanced Ruling in the serial case was overruled. This is in 2003. Then in 2005, another ruling came in the case of Abdul Razak, which was again by the Authority for Advanced Ruling. And here again they say, no, Supreme Court was not correct and that judgment was distinguished, and on that basis said, no, UAE income is not liable to tax. But then thereafter, Bombay ITT came in the case of Green Emirates in the year 2005. That's why I have made it out of chart here, where after considering the serial judgment of Authority for Advanced Ruling, after considering Abdul Razak judgment in the case of Abdul Razak by the Authority for Advanced Ruling, decided that no, it cannot be said UAE income is not liable to tax. And then Delhi High Court, after considering all the judgment in July 2012, held that yes, UAE income cannot be said to be not liable to tax. And this judgment is valid till date and has not been overruled and has not been distinguished by any judgment thereafter. On that basis, frankly, I am of the view that yes, even UAE income cannot be taxed under this law, and it cannot be said that it is not liable to tax. But frankly, friend, I must admit that I overheard some discussion, some seminar, where one of the CBDT official was speaking, and his view was contrary to my view. He said, no, UAE income is not liable to tax, and then they will get caught in this new amended provision. I am frankly of the view that probably this may not be a correct interpretation, but may get tested in the court of law later on. And that is why I just put in the slide, yes, one of the view I had on this issue, I had a small concern. Now, look into this fact, what will be the impact? Impact of the amendment will be exactly the same which I told. That earlier there was a condition that you need not be in India for 190 days or more than 119 days. But here there is no condition that you are in India for 1 day or 2 days, because that is not applicable. But only option available to you is that your income in India should not be more than 15 lakh rupees. So in case I am a stateless person, but if I do not earn income in India more than 15 lakh rupees, then this section will not get hold of me. I am out of this section. Again, I believe same implication will come up, and this is the takeaway. What this person will do and what our advice will be, considering the adverse impact of the amendment, such person is not need to deem resident, ensure that income from Indian sources does not exceed 15 lakh rupees, ensure that individual qualify as resident of some other country, acquire citizenship of some other country. And in this regard, I have a chart of various countries which are giving on the plate a citizenship of other country. It may be good to say that they are welcome to go to any country and take the citizenship, but I am of the view, look into the larger interests of the country where we are looking for investment, we are looking to the non-resident Indian. This type of amendment probably may not be what we all say in the overall interest of the country. This need to be, I believe, reconsidered, as the chairman of International Tax Committee was cited in the opening remarks saying that this amendment was approved when the parliament was in the hurry on account of this coronavirus issues. Probably nobody has looked into the implication, but looking to the fact, a similar amendment was made in the year 2004, and that amendment was undone by the Finance Act 2005. I am reasonably confident that this type of amendment still time is there, and one need to work upon this, and probably it can be undone, because I am still convinced that this amendment is not in the overall interest of the country, and neither it is going to achieve the objective, so-called objective stated in the memorandum, both the amendment. Because what we are going to tax is a tax on an income of business or profession which is controlled or set up in India. I am not privy to which income we are looking, what are the benefit, what are the taxes likely to be collected. But apparently 400,000 non-resident all getting unsettled because of this amendment, because the message to them is loud and clear that you may get caught on this new amendment. Either you reduce your visit to India less than 120 days, or you reduce your income less than 50 lakh rupees if you want to have a peace with it. That's a part which I believe this is presentation. I believe with this I can take the questions which are there on this part. Presentations?
Yes, yes. Slides are ready.
Can we take the no questions, I believe?
Yes, yes, Jansab. In fact, very, very rightly said. And now I'll actually request the chairman, SciTax and TTC to, in fact, make an appropriate representation. Must have already been made, but make another detailed one to the Ministry of Finance, giving the details which we have already shared. We have already given. Now, let us make a detailed one and then share with the government. Tarun, yes,
you rightly mentioned the required representation, and more particularly after hearing the very learned speech of C.A. Jain ji, that we are much enlightened to understand that how the stated taxation policy of non-residents and these amendments are in contradiction, and also probably it also goes against the economic objectives of the country. So what I was telling in the intervening time was that the Direct Taxes Committee with International Taxation Committee has also undertaken one project under the guidance of ICAI President, that how to incentivize flow of business and industries and flow of money to India in the change scenario, particularly the developments with reference to China, and India may become one more attractive destination, and how the hurdles in the taxation system should be discussed and represented to the government of India. So Ved Jain Saab is going to certainly help us. I had a talk with him and he has kindly agreed to help us. And we'll also be inviting the offshore colleagues, that whoever has interest to contribute this project of the ICAI, kindly let us know. We'll also be inviting the colleagues in India to contribute in this very important project, revival of the Indian economy, and how to incentivize the other countries to come to India for their businesses industry. With this background, Pramod ji, you can continue with the questions, and Jain Saab will definitely respond to the best.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. Sir, indeed, splendid way you shared the views, which is very, very important for the nation as well. Of course, there would be, if the provisions remain as such, then there would be numerous litigations. But just few questions, because we are receiving a lot of questions. Just 2-3 initial questions out here, sir. Sir, if we say that, is there any change for the merchant navy or the seafarers?
No, there is no change. I will just say that there are 2 clauses when you leave India. For leaving India, there is no change. In the year in which you leave India, for that purpose, the period of 60 days instead of one period of 182 days will continue. So, even for people who live, seafarers go out, it will be 182 days. And in the year in which you go out, that will also be 182 days. It is only the second explanation. When you are having become non-resident, you come to India for a visit to India, that period has been reduced. So in the first year, it will continue to be 182 days.
Sir, but in the case of seafarers, there was a specific explanation. Is it still there, or now it could be covered under 6(1)(a)?
No, I will say there is I believe 3 year back, a special amendment was made to compute the period of the seafarers, and for that rules have also been notified. If I am correct, there is a rule 126 which also defines the period, and I am reasonably sure that for seafarer there is no change. The moment they enter the ship, and from that period or day onward, they are a non-resident, and that period will be counted. They need not worry. I must say it. My presentation, deliberation may be a little harsh, looking to the larger interests of the country. So it's not that country doesn't need taxes, but I was of the view that this provision may not be so helpful, and one should look into the objective. So that's why I was looking into the memorandum also, as well as the objective ultimately to be achieved. So I could not find out any justification for that purpose.
Great. Sir, one question which was earlier thought, and it is that the question has been asked by many people out here, is that, okay, what you are saying is that the UAE, Dubai may not be covered due to the judicial freeze. But suppose there is a person who is residing in India for 100 days, residing in UAE for 100 days and 150 days in UK. Is a citizen of India. In that case, would 6(1)(a) be applicable?
I believe, in my opinion, if the tax consultant, it will not be applicable. Why I say so? See, objective is a stateless person. A person can arrange its affair in a manner where he is not a resident of any country. I can move into 12 countries 30 days each. 30 days each.
Right,
and I
right.
can be. And by and large, all sportsmen, all these personalities, etc., they do have it. And India is not only one country. Even if you heard all tennis players, right from John Bog, right from Federer, all Rafael Nadal, etc., all are considered to be non-resident, and they choose country like Monaco, etc., where they become a resident or look like this. So what I say, international policing of taxation may be a good idea to get in some meeting or in OECD meeting. Probably to introduce in the manner where it is counterproductive for the country, probably it may not be advisable. I may pose a question here. Tax is not an end to the society. Tax is a mean to the society. In India, we have so many provisions. Why we exempt income of export? Why we say if you put a factory in northeast India, we will be exempt? Why we say SEZ income is exempt? Why we say FCNR interest is exempt? Why we say NRE interest is exempt? Because country looks to be a larger interest to be achieved for that purpose, and that's why we say, yes, our purpose gets served on this purpose. Now, what we are sending a message is, look, there is a gentleman who is 100 days in India, 100 days in Canada, 100 days in another country. He being holding my passport, I want to tax it. Now, as a taxman, I may say, all right, if you want to run away, you leave my passport. But that's not in the interest of the country. Because the issue is, see, tax is one of the costs which everyone will take into consideration. Which one should not consider it is there like that. So that is what I see, the larger interest should be looked into that part of the industry. And what we are going to achieve now, if you say, even this, as you say, 6(1)(a) get introduced, and you say now you are a resident under me, and I will tax you. What you will do? What your amendment says, you are a resident but not a resident. If you are carrying on any business or profession which is control or set up in India, I will do it. He does not have any business, he does not have control, he is doing something else outside India. What you will do? He has nothing to do with that business in India, nothing to do with that profession. No tax. Identify those people. I said there may be few advocate and professional which may be settled in UK or otherwise, where you may make an allegation that you are coming to India for 120 days, doing practice here, you are a bar council member or a HCA member here, and you are having an income. I want to tax your global income. Even in that case, at best you will be doing it, that whatever professional income is arising in UK or that country, you will tax it there. At that part only. Nothing beyond that. And in tiebreaker also, that person will win over. I'm reasonably sure. The controversy will arise with poor other non-resident, simple non-resident who are salaried. They will have to fight it out with the tax officer. Look into the tax administration in India. Because every person who is filing a non-resident return, and in case the passport says in India is more than 120 days, immediately the issue will come to my table. I will just determine whether you are a tiebreaker rule, where do you stand. The person who is settled in UK will make sure that in tiebreaker he wins over and UK takes it away.
So, sir, as per you, this 6(1)(a) is not applicable to Dubai, UAE. It is not applicable to persons who are not into. So, to whom it is applicable?
I'm still wondering. I'm still wondering to whom they want to read. The question is, because you see the reason I can explain. you introduce an amendment in the finance bill, and then you try to improve upon one after the other to get something out of it. But I still want that in 6(1)(a), you kept a very wide definition, and the moment you went to 6(6), you diluted it. So now, as I said, yes, you will say, no, in case you are a high net worth individual, you are doing a business, you are coming to India, you have a setup outside India, you have a setup in India, it is the same business which you are doing in India, doing outside India. So that income which is in Indian income, in any case, I am supposed to pay tax. So any income which you are arising outside India of that business or that profession, you will get hold of that person. How many people and what is the income we are looking into and what we are doing to my all UAE residents, those who are employed, because in case I go with the interpretation which is being propagated that you are not liable to tax will include people who are not liable to pay tax in UAE. Now all those people will, in case they come to India for more than 120 days, they will become a resident. And now what they will do? Either they will reduce the income from less than 15 lakh rupees or they will stop coming to India. Now you can say as a tax official, yes, you enjoy, but it doesn't matter to me. I will be happy.
Sir, one question out here. What you said, this 120 days, less than 182 days. Now, it is covered as an, you would in RNR under 6(6). So when he would be RNR for 6(6), would it be every year, or suppose he is coming to India for 150 days for continuously 4-5 years? Then does the situation change or remain same? That he remains resident for RNR?
As I said in my deliberation, it is year to year. It is year to year. Every year will be examined. In case your income is more than 15 lakh, your voice got proper. Yeah.
Sir,
your voice got proper.
For continuous 4 years, he is coming to India for more than 120 days. Let's say 150 days. So what is the status?
So he will continue to be resident, but not ordinary resident all along. Because there is no condition for how many years you can do it. Because section 6 is there is another condition that for 2 year benefit is for other condition. Year to year.
So, sir, do you suggest to your clients that instead of holding the investments and other things in India as an individual name, have a company or LLP? So that the income in the individual hands
I will not say, see, we are all patriotic, we all have an affinity with India. I believe I'm still hopeful that this provision may be looked into again. The way I have explained in 2004, it was looked into again. One has to revisit it and make the right people agree that how it is going to be. We may be wrong. I would like to be get educated on this. Yes, Mr. Jain, what you are thinking probably is not correct, and these are the people. I will want to. I said there are enough mechanism available. What I am speaking is from my experience in the legislation on this issue, which I have been trying to interpret on this issue. So I think it doesn't look to be so, I think, productive on that issue that one should look into. I will just give you an example. There was an old English movie, which we call Don't Raise the Bridge, Lower the River. It was a humorous movie. So a ship was to pass through the river. The bridge was very lower. So people said, you raise the bridge so that ship, no, don't raise the bridge, lower the river. So this is one of the provisions which fall in that category.
Sir, I'm just repeating once again. So do you suggest that instead of holding the investment in individual name, they incorporate a company or LLP in India? So they
yes, then yeah. But that yes. See, why company? You can give to your family members. You can reduce your income.
They can have an LLP also.
Under section 56(2) also, give to relative is exempt.
Exempt. But if they still want to retain money, so LLP could be. Coming to the questions which have been asked, I'm starting with because the questions are too many. After this Finance Bill 2020, in case of non-residents who have to file their return in income under 115A5, the question is the income in respect of the return is to be filed is 115AA, which is interest and dividend, as well as now fee for technical services that has been introduced. Now it says 115A says that tax at the rate of 20% plus surcharges in the case of dividend income is to be paid to the charged to the non-residents. Does this mean that those non-resident shareholders claiming treaty benefit whereby dividend is taxable at a lower rate, they have to file their ITR?
Yes, I think Pramod ji, this is another amendment which has been made by the Finance Act 2020, and where explicitly it has been made clear that this benefit of non-filing of return will be available only when you have paid the tax as per the rates in force, which is 20%. Now, in the case of a UAE resident, now I am posing a question. If he has an investment in India and the tax treaty rate says a 10% tax rate is applicable, and that gentleman, because TDS will be at 10%, he will file the residential certificate. Now, he will be required to file the return, and because TDS will be again 10%, because if he has been, I think, proactive, so he will get the certificate and make the deductor sure that he doesn't deduct tax more than 10%. It is not that treaty will override that, or TDS provision will override the treaty provision. But still, you want the paperwork. Why? What is the purpose? Probably department want to know whether you are really a resident of another country, and this clause of 6(1) which has been amended, I can look into whether in 120 days you can get caught in my web that where you are a resident but not a resident. And if that be so, then I will not give you the treaty benefit and you get tax. I think that's a web they have woven.
So in this case, the companies declaring dividend have to be very careful to deduct under section 194 or 195. So if they are going for 195, again they have to see the benefit of DTA AAs to be taken. So they have to take all the documentation of TRC, Form 10F and all those things. I don't know
I believe that will be the major challenge.
Major challenge at the time of declaring dividend. So it will
frankly speaking, when we are discussing this point, if I can touch upon 194 and probably it is interesting now, bank, when you go to withdraw the cash, 20 lakh rupee, bank will say, show me last year 3 returns you have filed or not. An interesting aspect is 3 returns of the period of 139(1) has expired. So in case I go to withdraw in the month of May, I need to show the return of last 3 years, meaning by May 20, I need to show the return of 19, 18 and 17. But if I go in August, because then in 20 period, then I show the 20, 19 and 18. Because where the period for filing the return under section 139(1) has expired. So in May 2021 period has not expired. But 19, 18 and 17, then I need to take 3 returns. And income tax, that person will say yes, whether you have filed any of these 3 returns, 1 return only. And then if I go after July, and then bank officer should be intelligent enough to find out whether your due date is 31st July or your due date is 31st October. Because if he stays on August, then he need to look into that. I'm just wondering what will happen.
So huge work for bankers. That's great. In this question, another question which has been asked, what would be the case where that the person is a resident of a country with which India is not having a DTAA, so dividend, what rate it would be deducted, or if
20%, that's a non-resident, 20% will be applicable. See, law is very clear. If you are a non-resident, then 20% subject to treaty benefit.
Sir, a few questions have been asked on this PPF and NRE accounts. There are the NRIs holding PPF account in India. How its interest income would be treated under Income Tax Act?
Let me clear this issue, because this issue is hanging over with the non-resident for many years. And this happened because of one of the notification issued way back in 2017 by the, I think, Ministry of Department of Economic Services on that part. Friend, let me tell you, PPF is governed under the PPF scheme. Under the Income Tax Act, interest earned on that income is exempt, and investment made in PPF is eligible for deduction under section 80C up to rupees 1,50,000 rupees. Under the PPF scheme, any person is entitled to open a bank account or a PPF account other than a non-resident. So non-resident is not eligible to open a PPF account. Issue arose, what happened that today I am a resident, I have opened an account, and PPF account has to run for 15 years, and tomorrow I become a non-resident, then what happened to me? One notification was issued in way back in 2017 saying that in such cases that account will stand automatically closed and interest will be payable at the post office saving rate, which was 4%. Fortunately, that circular was withdrawn later on in March 18 immediately, saying that NRE account, PPF account opened by a person who when he was a resident but later on become a non-resident shall continue. He can make the deposit every year and can earn interest, and that income will continue to be exempt and will continue to be available for all purposes under the income tax law. But I may put a rider that this income is exempt under Indian income tax law. Those non-resident who are outside and their income is chargeable to tax on global income basis, this PPF interest is also chargeable in their home country where they are resident. And in this regard, USA has been following very seriously now under the FATCA. All those accounts where people are having old account here and they are getting from all bank here, etc. And all bank post office are duty bound to share that information with the US tax authority. So please make sure when you are happen to be a resident of other country where your income is chargeable to globally, then this PPF interest is chargeable to tax in your home country therein. Subject to the local law, whatever it is.
Perfectly guided, sir. So same question is for the NRE accounts. When they say they become resident, what happens to the taxability of the NRE accounts? Lot of questions are
law is very law is very simple. Let me explain the law. There are two accounts which NRE has. When I leave India out of to become a non-resident, the day I leave India under the FEMA law, I become a non-resident. And I become entitled to open an account outside India, and at the same time I am duty bound to convert my Indian account into NRO account. I need to intimate my bank that I have become a non-resident. Please convert my ordinary saving account into non-resident account. Somebody has also asked me a question, what is the time period? Under the law, no such time period has been prescribed. One has to immediately intimate, but I will say a 3 months period is a reasonable period in which one should intimate. When you come back to India, you are, as I said, that under the Income Tax Act, there are two provisions, Section 10(4), where interest on NRE account is exempt to the extent when you are a non-resident under the FEMA law, FEMA Section 2W. So once you have come back to India, the day you land in India for settling in back to India, you are a resident under the FEMA law. You are not for a single day non-resident. So that interest on that will become immediately chargeable to tax because that exemption is linked to your account and you are not entitled to keep that account NRE account. But you are having an FCNR account, foreign currency non-resident account, which exemption is available under Section 10, subsection 15, clause FA, if I am correct on that issue. That exemption is available on interest earned on foreign currency non-resident account available to resident and also resident but not ordinary resident. So this exemption is available to both the people. This status of resident but not ordinary resident can continue for a period of 2 years normally because 9 out of 10 years give you 2 periods. So that exemption will continue. So what we advise when people want to come back to India, that NRE account you please get converted into FCNR account because in NRE rupees you are holding a rupee account. You are entitled to convert rupee account into dollar account or a yen account or a mark account, whatever you want, euro account. That FCNR account can be converted into RFC account and interest on RFC account shall continue to be exempt. Later on after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you want to move back, you can go back and take the money. Exemption in this respect of RFC account will continue to be available so long you are resident but not ordinary resident. But after 2 years you will become a resident, then that interest will become chargeable.
Very well. Great, sir. A question from Chinay Solanki. NRI is US resident, so is based in USA and earning income from house property and interest income in India. But the total income earned is less than the basic exemption limit. Is he allowed to take the double taxation rebate in USA for this income for which he has paid no tax in India?
So law is very simple, I must say. You can take a credit of the tax which you have paid. If you have not paid the tax, you are not. Except there is a one clause which we use tax sparing provision. Under some treaty, there is a tax sparing where you are not liable to pay tax in respect of some exemption concession given in particular country. Some treaty has a provision that in the other country you can take credit of the taxes which you would have paid but for the exemption. We use a technical term tax sparing provision. We have a similar provision with UK. Where we have something like this. We earlier used to have a similar provision with Thailand also. That treaty was there. So that benefit was there. But if in the present query, income below threshold, no tax having paid, no tax credit.
This question is again, let's say Mr. Rohit from Mumbai, that they have incorporated LLC in USA, having 2 Indian residents as member. All decisions of the LLC is taken in India. What is the status of LLC under income tax? If turnover is more than 10 lakhs, is LLC liable to maintain books of accounts in India? Whether net profit of LLC will be determined in which is determined in USA can be considered as taxable income in India?
Interesting question. Ideally, the facts tell that this is place of effective management is situated in India. But the only rescue point in the query is the threshold given in the board circular, which says in case your gross turnover, say, is less than up to 50 crore rupees, this place of effective management provision rule will not be applicable. So looking to this 10 lakh rupees turnover and around, probably this LLC will get survived. Otherwise, the facts are very clear. The place of effective management is in India. But this will survive because the board circular will give an exemption to it.
Sir, is this LLC just like a partnership firm? Or is it like
Limited Liability Corporation, that is LLP. Limited LLC is the corporation normally. US permits you to have one-man company or two-man company. That's it.
But if it is a partnership just like LLP, so if it is a firm, then this income would be taxable in India, because in the case of firm, the taxable
then the partner, it get decided that you are right, absolutely right. If an NRI returns to India in say July 19, is interest on his NRI this we have taken, I suppose. I couldn't get you. I am just asking another question. This Mr. Gooch from Kumar, how does the US or UK resident takes tax credit for taxes paid in India or tax deducted by India on dividend remittances? What documents need to be provided to them to claim tax credit in US or UK? These questions have been generally asked. It is simple question, it is administrative question. We have a TDS certificate, etc. 26 years, based on that credit will be allowed. Mr. Epi Reddy from Hyderabad, as per DTAA with USA, it has been told that in case of independent personal services, income may be taxed in other contracting state in certain cases. However, rate was not given in the Article 15. In such cases, what will be the tax rate? No, see, when tax rate is not prescribed, then it is a local tax rate. Unless, see, tax rates are normally not prescribed in the treaty. When benefit is to be given, then the tax rate are prescribed. They say dividend paid by a company, other company can be taxed in other state. However, the rate of dividend shall not exceed 10%. This is one of the way. So, independent personal services, if it can be taxed in other country, then the rate will be the rate applicable in that country. Sir, an interesting question from Mr. Gajendra from Mumbai. Though simple, but yes, interesting. It says, do we have to file Form 15 CB in case of dividends paid to non-resident? Since now it is taxable. Dividend? I don't know how. Dividend paid now to non-residents. When it is chargeable to tax, I believe, see, all those Rule 37BB will be fully applicable. So there are 4 clauses in 37BB. So one has to accordingly look into that aspect only. Sir, so actually it would be applicable. So how the companies would be filing so many 15 CACBs? A good thing. It has to be looked into. If I understand correctly, there are different provisions on that applicability. Threshold of 5 lakh rupees, and then we say business to business payment, and then there's a big list of where income is not chargeable to tax. So I believe whatever it is, one has to comply with it. There is no escape route for that person. Sir, in this case, it would be applicable because 5 lakhs is for the whole entity. So I know that it will be applicable. It will be applicable. I don't think there is any escape route applicable. Mr. Rahul from Mahanubag, sir, under section 6(1)(a), condition you cumulative stay in India is 60 days or more during the financial year and 365 days or more during the 4 previous financial year. Is there any impact on this point? Please explain. I don't think when I am in a deeming provision 6(1)(a), the deeming provision is very clear that in case you claim to be you are not a resident because of your income is not chargeable to tax because of a residential status or something like this, and you are a citizen of India and your income is more than 15 lakh rupees in India, you are a deemed resident. Nothing else. The question again on this issue, this 15 lakhs issue, Jashri Kadambi from Bangalore, my client is Indian passport holder, has income more than 15 lakhs by way of rents and sale of property or shares and has exempted income in Hong Kong from sale of shares. Will he be taxed on the global income? No, I said not global income. That's why I say first the criteria will be how long you have been in India. If you have been more than 120 days, then the next question will be what is your income in India, total income in India, and which does not include income outside India. Only that income, foreign source income, which is related to business or profession controlled or set up in India. I believe in the present case, rental income, all Hong Kong income will not be considered. But in case they have an income from India, from share, capital gain, etc. in India more than 15 lakh rupees, and they have been in India for more than 120 days, so then this provision will be applicable. Even after applicability of this provision, they will not be required to pay tax on income which they are earning outside India. The only extended provision will be that income from business or profession set up in India. That is why I am saying that this provision want to target to whom? Even after getting hold of the person under this provision, which income you are going to target? Only the business or profession set up in India. So this is a very narrow provision. At the other end, a person may lose so many things without being carrying on business because your income may become chargeable to tax at a higher rate. Some exemption may go. Treaty benefit will not be applicable. TDS provision will get changed over. So that is the issue which I am raising it out.
Right. Sir, lot of people have asked for the PPT. So we are sharing the PPT.
I will send it. I think I have already sent to Direct Tax Committee. I must say my apology to all because I think the connectivity was poor somewhere. I think in the beginning people could not see the PPT or could not. I think my voice was also maybe breaking in between, I believe, somewhere. So I believe my apologies to all my participants could not do it. But PPT I have already shared with the Secretary Direct Tax Committee and they can share with all the people. And it will be my pleasure that in case still any questions are there, so people have my contact details on the social media. So they are welcome to talk to me, contact or through the Direct Tax Committee, they are welcome.
Taking this, because the time is just coming to end, so taking the last question before I request Chairman Sir. Sheetal ji has asked, if the Indian citizens employed outside India, say USA, and stays India for 120 days for company project in India, what will be the residential status if Indian income is first more than 15 lakhs and second less than 15 lakhs?
See, the law is very clear. If you have been in India for 120 days or more, your income is more than 15 lakh rupees, irrespective of the purpose for which you are in India, your status will change. So in the question is, if you have been more than 120 days, your income is more than 15 lakh rupees, you will be a deemed resident, but your income will be only chargeable to the extent that other than outside income, only business or profession set up in India, which I believe he being an employee may not be an income. But the challenge will be the income which he is earning in India, computation and tax rate may change on that part. So that's the challenge which we are having.
So certain exempt incomes which are available to non-residents will be made taxable.
See, we in India have issued time to time so many bonds. I will just recall in 1998 we issued a Resurgent India bond, which was basically subscribed by non-resident when India was short of the foreign exchange. In 2003 again we issued some bond, etc. Now I think in 2017 also we issued what we call Masala bond 194 LC, where we say you subscribe in foreign currency but it will be denominated in rupee. That's why we call it Masala bond. Subscribe in foreign currency, paid exchange, but denominated in rupee. Risk of the bondholder in the exchange, and we charge tax rate is 5%. Now this is available all to non-resident. So the moment I get caught in this embargo, the problem will be that 5% will make it turn out to be 35%. So that's it. Another benefit of treaty is that your treaty rate is inclusive of surcharge and education charge. There is no further surcharge education charge. So once you get out of the treaty, all others implications do follow. And my biggest threat to a challenge is now how much dispute and litigation it will create for non-residents. That's in another area because the residential status will be subject matter. Because I don't think we have many cases on the tiebreaker rule, mainly because by and large disputes have not been there on the residential status. Because 183 days was such a condition where you cannot be a resident of two countries because 365 divided by 2 cannot give 183 more than. But now with 120 days, I believe there will be many such situations where you will get 365 divided by 2, India as well as other countries. And then tiebreaker rule will be applicable and we will have more case laws or more litigation. That's the only concern which I'm talking about.
Concern, sir, when it is litigation, so you are the beneficiary out there. So that is great, sir.
I will not say, I will not like to be that in that part of this. ultimately looking to the larger interest of the country, it sometimes pains when you look into the litigation aspect. Litigation is a painful process which we one have to pass through it. And I do agree with people who are manipulator or people who have done something wrong, they should be taken care of by the revenue authorities. But at the same time, where the other issues are there, so unnecessary litigation should be avoided. That's why we have a Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, people to get out of it.
Perfectly. Very well said, sir. So you have deliberated, so I would say in a masala type, and we have got so many thought-provoking ideas, and you have cleared so many issues. I hope, I am very sure that both the committees together would be taking so many points out of it, and surely we would be needing your help in giving the representation to the
Before Pramodji to conclude, Pramodji, before you conclude, let me express my sincere thanks to you for giving me this opportunity, organizing this program at a very quick reply. My thanks to Chairman Direct Tax Committee, Tarunji, who has been kind enough and to agree to this proposal. And my thanks to Chairman for the International Direct Tax Committee, Hegdeji, for being kind enough to accommodate me and to organize this program. My thanks to all my participants and all my members, friends, professionals who have come and joined this program. And my apologies to all also that this program in the beginning was not so clear and your picture was blurred, etc. We tried it. I have been doing many programs, but this is for the first time this has happened, something going wrong with the connectivity, etc. But I will share this PPT presentation and we'll like to work it on this. And thanks to all who have joined from different part of the world. As I see from my WhatsApp, that there are people who have joined from Singapore, there are people who have joined from Dubai, London, and USA. I'm just getting messages on this part also. So my sincere thanks to all for being listening to me and giving a patient hearing. And I tried my best to explain it. Friend, nothing to lose hope. We profession need to critically analyze and understand the provision. So it doesn't mean that we are critical of the government, but the idea is that we understand what implication can be. Probably sometime while drafting and while working it out, one may have missed it out. I have just tried to do it analysis from my side. My sincere thanks to all of you. And thank you, friends.
So nice of you. SciTax Chairman Hegde sir, if he wants to add something, is available if he is available right now. Tarunji, I suppose, is not here. Sir, thanks, Athan. Thanks, Athan, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks all viewers. Thank you very much.